Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking all things marketing, all things business, all things entrepreneurship, all things advertising, all things that we all love and care about because it grows our businesses, and that's because I am joined by a guest today who is equally obsessed with all of those things as I am and as you are, which is why you're listening. So I want to tell you about today's awesome guest. His name is Kole Riggs. He's the co-founder of Ad Labs Marketing. Kole has been in the performance marketing industry for more than 7 years, helping e-commerce and digital product brands grow through paid advertising. With his proprietary systems and strategies, Kole and his team at Ad Labs Marketing have helped their clients generate over $30 million in revenue and counting, and that's just since 2020. Through Ad Labs Marketing, Kole has worked with over 80 plus clients to scale their businesses and achieve their goals with data-driven paid advertising campaigns that fuel growth. And understanding Kole as well as I already do from talking to him off camera today, I know that so much of what he does is powered by, I'm going to say geekiness, because him and I both geek out over tools and tech, but also he loves building things and developing things, whether it's AI tools or the way that he gets nitty gritty with the data to help people in their ad campaigns. There's so much that I'm excited to dive into, so I'm not going to say anything else. We'll dive straight into my interview with Kole Riggs. Kole, what is up, dude? Welcome to the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me here. It's great.
Heck yes. Obviously, I've kind of tooted your own horn quite a bit this morning, and we've talked about how much you freaking love this stuff. Give us that backstory. How the heck did Kole end up where you are today?
Yeah, well, I first want to say that's one heck of an introduction. I greatly appreciate that. Really, a lot of this we got into the space coming from the fitness side, doing a lot of marketing with local gyms, and before 2020, right before the whole world started to end in a lot of ways, right? We were helping a handful of gyms, helping them grow. And then there was a lot of issues with everyone closing down just due to COVID itself in a lot of ways. And so then what we really started to transition to was sort of a hybrid process, which really started to move them to selling a lot of their physical products online and then also selling their programs online, which started to actually transition us more to working with people on the commerce side, if that makes sense. So we started locally. We started with a bunch of local organizations. We were working with about 20, 30 gyms at the time. And then as we helped them, we just started getting so much more fuel to the fire towards the e-commerce and digital products. Soon from there, with the boom of going into 2020, 2021, 2022, we were just starting getting a ton of e-commerce customers coming towards us to scale their campaigns and scale their business because there was just more cash and money in the system than there had been ever before. And they wanted to make sure they could try to capitalize on it efficiently. And so sort of that's where we're at now. It's been pretty crazy. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, I love that overview. And Kole, it's actually interesting. So I feel like if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, paid PPC was all the rage. Everyone was talking about paid advertising. And it's almost weird to say because obviously paid advertising is probably the single biggest grossing marketing channel still to this day. And it will continue to be for a heck of a long time. But it almost feels like it's out of the fad now. Everybody would rather talk about AI. Everybody would rather talk about going viral on TikTok. Talk to me about why the heck do we still care about paid ads?
That's a great question. I mean, paid ads is the bread and butter of things in a lot of ways. And what's important is if all of your other systems are firing well, right? You got your email campaigns, you have your SMS, your landing pages are designed well, right? You've put in the thought and the effort towards all of the organic pieces of your business so that engine can run, so you can generate sales naturally. When that's functioning, you can then start putting a heavy focus on paid so you can drive so many more customers to you at a much faster rate than you could just doing everything organically, right? So essentially it's just the biggest lever that you have at your disposal if you have the capital to go into that kind of investment, right? And so we've always just seen that it's been a really positive way for you to grow your business once you've built some of your foundations. So it's really cool to see when people are actually at that point and they can start scaling.
Yeah, which leads me to, I don't think I've actually ever said this out loud on this show, which is crazy because it's one of my fundamental business thoughts. But I've always told entrepreneurs that, to me, the difference between kind of just like figuring out a business and trying to get clients, kind of like the freelancing stuff, versus having a business, the thing that differentiates those two is a business can reliably get more customers and clients. And I like how you talk about it being a lever. Like, we know exactly how levers work. You do this and you have this outcome. Talk to us about your approach with paid ads, because there are a lot of ways to approach paid ads. And I know it's such a broad question, but I like how you already brought up the concept of, when you have capital, leverage that capital, let it work for you. When you have money, maybe it's not the best option on day one if you've got more time than money, but walk us through your approach. When paid ads, why paid ads, and how the heck are you guys doing it differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll try to answer this in a few different ways, because paid advertising really comes in a few different phases. If you're an experienced, person on the business side, like you've done it a few times, right? Or you've got a lot of experience, you have someone in your corner to work with you, you might be able to do paid advertising out of the gate. And I think what's important is this really kind of lean towards really any business model, but I would say for the instance of this conversation, let's say it's like digital products or e-commerce. Digital products, you have a high margin, almost 100% profit when you do get a sale, hypothetically, right? Like you're not incurring any additional cost when they execute that sale. Whereas like e-commerce, you're usually running like really thin margins. So if you don't have a lot of capital on hand already and you just spent all this money on product, you're really going to have to lean on the organic side and start getting that engine going. So once the engine is going, then we would say, let's start trying to scale your campaigns a little bit more. Now, as far as the process itself, we really try to start by getting a really clear understanding of who you are, who you're targeting, right? Now, that's a very basic answer, right? But I think what's more important is leveraging a lot of the tools that we have available these days. We have a handful of our own internal tools which we've developed, which help us to look deeper into your customers' audiences than you can normally get through some of the platforms. For example, over the years, Facebook's really sort of hid a lot of data that you can get so that you can get more specificity with who you're targeting, how you're targeting, when you're targeting them. And it's really important when you say you have a very niche product. I mean, let's just take a pen, for example, right? Like you want to target it towards a very specific customer base because you don't want to blow all of your ad dollars, right? If you just spent, a handful of thousands of dollars to build a brand and you're getting things started, you don't want to spend $10,000 just trying to find the perfect customer, because for a lot of people, they're probably already in a net loss, right? You want to start trying to get that first dollar profitably as quickly as possible. And so we really try to focus on a system to generate highly targeted customers out of the gate. Does that answer your question? I just want to make sure. I'm happy to give you as much detail as possible. I just don't want to dive too deep unless necessary for you.
Yeah, no, not only does it answer my question, but it leads to so many other topics that I want to dive into. I'm just like, it's rare. Podcast listeners know this about me. I love just going where the conversation takes us. But as you're giving that answer, I'm just like frantically jotting down notes. And I was like, ooh, Kole, I want to hear you talk more about that. Ooh, I want to hear you talk more about that. And it's funny. I'm going to put you on the spot here because you have a tendency to do exactly what I love doing, which is in the examples that you're giving, you'll go for whatever is on your desk right now, which for me often leads to random examples about selling notebooks and tape and other random things. So I want to use the pen as the example though, because a lot of entrepreneurs, it's something I hear a lot. Kole, I can imagine you hear it even more than I do, where people are just like, Facebook ads don't work. Paid ads don't work because my business is so unique that what works for millions of other businesses couldn't possibly work for mine. Talk to us about that. Dispel that myth for us, or share some insights. What does it work for? What doesn't it work for?
Yeah, I would say I've always seen paid ads work. It sounds very egotistical, right? I've always seen paid ads work. The thing is you're likely not executing on them correctly, right? You're looking at them as a function of, let me just throw money into it, right? I'm just going to just build an audience because, let's just say I'm selling this pen. So I'm going to look up people who write, let's just say this is like a fountain pen, right? Like fancy calligraphy. And so let's just say I find a Facebook group of people that write, using the fancy calligraphy pens. And then I start running ads, targeting them. And then I just go, oh, well, it doesn't work. Facebook ads doesn't work. No, what doesn't work is likely your offer, your creative, your positioning, the person you used in the video or the image, right? You have so many levers within the ad itself where you're able to provide context, depth, clarity, and associate with who you're wanting to target that is often missed, right? Anyone can take a picture of something, can write a caption and post it and say that they run Facebook ads or advertising. It's one thing to do that. It's a completely different thing to then do it and then build a process to get guaranteed or highly reliable results consistently, regardless of the product or the brand or the industry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I like about that answer that I want to call out for listeners is how you said, I've never seen ads not work. The reason is because you've probably seen ads not work on day one, but it is an iterative process. And I think that's something so important for every entrepreneur, and especially all you entrepreneurs out there, to hear. But Kole, I want to dive into another part of your past answer, which is from my notes that I was furiously jotting down with my pen that you just sold me. And that is, use the S word already, scale. And that's one aspect of ads and advertising campaigns that I think people get wrong. And I always, Kole, it's something that I laugh at when I hear, because I have a bunch of friends who have ad agencies, and I'll hear their potential clients say, well, yeah, can't you just like set it all up for me? Why would I have to pay you a monthly retainer? Why is this an ongoing thing? Can't you just set it and forget it? Talk to us about scalability of campaigns. Do they stop working? Why do they stop working? How do we keep them actually scaling? Because I remember when I launched my book, it was very easy to have a profitable campaign out of the gates, but 30 days later, it's no longer profitable. Walk us through that complex jungle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll lean into this pretty well. There's usually different stages of scale, and so there's two different methods of scaling. There is one which is vertical scaling. Let's just take it as simple as you're just adding more zeros to the end of the campaign, right? That's what most people think of. It's like, oh, I built this campaign, it worked, so let me just add more zeros to it, and now I'm magically going to start printing more money. Then you also have a thing called horizontal scaling. So you're going to take one campaign that was working or one ad group that was working, which is like a targeted subset, and then you're going to duplicate it. And then you have, let's say you're spending $50 a day in this one campaign, you duplicate it, and now you're spending $50 a day in the other one, or maybe you made like an increase. So now you're spending $100 to $150 a day. So then hooray, you scaled, right? But there are still issues that occur with this. So one thing that's really important to understand, all of the ad platforms, when you're going on there and you build an audience, let's just say your audience is a pool, right? Like you're actually in like a, one of those above ground circular pools that we all likely have seen when we were kids, right? When you start running ads, and let's just say it's $10 a day, $50, $100 a day, right? You can only stand in one part of the pool at any given time. You're not so big that you can take up the entire pool, unless you're maybe in like a kiddie pool, right? In that case, it's a very small audience and you're gonna get saturated really quickly. But let's just say you're in a really big pool, okay? So you can only be in one space at a time. And let's say that's with $50 a day. And then when you go to scale it, you're only increasing by a small amount. But every time you scale it, you're now taking up new space. So what's happening is the platform has to readjust and try to identify your target customer in this new space that you were not in before. So when you started spending and it was working, what that means is it found a very specific pocket of an audience that was working. And so when you start to add more money to it, it has to now go through and do a relearning, right? In a way of who is out there, who is to our identifiable market, like who's our ideal customer from this. And so it might take some time for it to optimize. This is more so now, especially with a lot of platforms losing some level of clarity around data or the delays in those data changes, right? There's delays and kickbacks from iPhone devices is a big one, right, with the whole iOS 14 stuff. And then we've also have a lot of browser issues. So when it comes to scaling, your process has definitely changed over the last couple of years. And so when it comes to that growth, it's really important to look at the different ways you can expand. We generally recommend, just as a method of maybe starting with your scaling, rather than just dumping more into the initial campaign that was successful, we generally recommend going and doing the horizontal scaling, where we duplicate the winning campaign, we identify the winning creatives, the audiences, the ad text, right? And we either take that exact formula, dump it into the new one, right? Or we go through and we make iterative variations into the new campaign. Now, we do that, we would generally, depending on like the size of scale or how fast we're trying to scale, we might just let that sit for a couple of days to see how it flushes out. But generally, you'll see that it either starts to keep up, or obviously it'll start being a clear one way or another. It's either going to start going up and keeping the same, it'll start doing better, or it'll start doing worse. There's a lot of different things you can look at, right? But I hope that gives you some initial insight. And by the way, I'm actually totally fine with like giving you or anyone who listens to this like a guide on how to do some scaling, which I think would be pretty helpful for anyone. So just let me know.
Heck yeah, we are definitely going to mention your guide at the end of this episode. So listeners, definitely stick around because clearly Kole loves this stuff. I promise you that at the beginning, and we're getting into so many nitty gritty aspects of it. Kole, I want to talk to you about this though, because I remember out of the gates, like I'm thinking about my early 20s when I just started my marketing agency, and it's exactly the scale that you talked about, the adding the zeros to your ad campaign. I was like, man, if I could spend $50 a day up front and then get one client, even if it's one client a month, that more than pays for itself. The next month I'll spend $100 a day if I get 2 clients. And that's the way that I was viewing it. And I feel like somewhere along the way, Kole, maybe this is going to be an episode where the two of us throw some shade at the way that the traditional marketing industry works online. But I feel like somewhere along the way, I started complicating things. And I'm going to blame, people know how much I love marketing, but I'm going to blame funnels here, is that we all started complicating our marketing funnels. I always had a whiteboard wherever my office was, and I would just draw out the most elaborate funnels. And obviously hearing you talk about how ROI focused you are, you're just like, hey, run the ads to generate revenue so that you can scale vertically and horizontally. Dispel all that for us. There's so much to unpack when it comes to the wonderful world of elaborate funnels. Give us your perspectives on that.
I think simple is better. First off, there's too much going on in today's world, right? I mean, I don't think it needs to be super elaborate. I think if you're going to be elaborate in anything, it's not going to be necessarily the funnel itself, right? The pages. I have a couple clients, right, that sell like a $39 fitness product. We've generated well more than $30 million for our customers at this point. Just for this one customer alone, we generated about $14 million for them this year from a single funnel for a $39 product, and they average a 2x return. Why do they average a 2x return? Because of what they're doing on the back end post-sale, right? And so if I would focus, in a sense, less so on trying to build the most elaborate funnel, but more so simplifying it so much so that the buying process is easy, and then focusing on the post-purchase, right? Or like very close after they purchase. Like on Amazon when they say, hey, people also bought XYZ. That's a great way to do it. Or focusing on your email, your SMS, your customer service, your personal follow-up, right? Your re-engagement with that customer. I've seen that has been a great way to dramatically improve your results overall, more so than focusing on did this green button do better versus the orange button, right? Or did this headline versus this headline. Those things are insanely valuable. There's only so much testing that I would probably put my time towards at a certain point. However, in the beginning stages, I'm going to, be sounding a little bit like a hypocrite here. I will say in the beginning stages, I think it's super important to focus on those because you want to make sure your messaging and your positioning is aligned with your target customer, right? But once you have it dialed in and you're at a point of consistent returns, like you're consistently getting a conversion rate that you're happy with, I would really focus on post-purchase systems. So if I'm going to think of an elaborate funnel, it's not going to necessarily be done on I'm going to say a whiteboard. I have a whiteboard. I just don't use it as much anymore. It's everything else. It's everything non-paid, mind you. Everything non-paid will help you just get a better return from your advertising because those free systems are helping you you're helping to capture more revenue as soon as possible, right? I will say most people don't seem to make a profit if they're just trying to do paid advertising for paid advertising's sake or to grow their business. They are all going to work well if they're all working in a unison together, just as a note.
shoot, Kole, you just opened a huge can of worms, because here's the thing. We've obviously had advertisers here on the show before. All of us have heard advertising agencies talk on podcasts, YouTube videos all over the place. We've all obviously clicked every Facebook ad under the sun about everyone who tells us how much ads are going to scale our business to 7 figures and beyond. But I love hearing this, because in this, to me, when we initially researched your business and reached out to you to come on the show, for us, it was clear that you don't just love ads, you love marketing, and even more than that, you just love business growth. And it's fascinating to me that here we are talking about pay-per-click advertising, talking about paid advertising, and we're talking about selling on the back end. And for me, firsthand, what really strikes me, and I'm just like, dang, listeners need to hear this message. We need to go deeper here. Is I remember my first ad campaign where I really crushed it was my free plus shipping book campaign. So I charged, I think it was $5.95 at the time for shipping and handling for my book. And then I sat down and I was like, shoot, I need to pay for shipping and handling, which $5.95 doesn't even cover it. I also need to cover the cost of the book, of the envelope, of all this stuff. And that ad campaign, I couldn't spend enough money on it. I wanted to scale it infinitely, because those people then came onto my email list and bought my $497 course, bought my $2,000 group program, which became a $4,000 group program. I was making money hand over fist thanks to losing money up front with an ad campaign. Talk to us more about that, because I don't think enough people, when they say, oh, paid ads don't work, they don't view it as a bigger part of their marketing mix. Go deeper into that for us, because I know that this is a new realm, especially in the scope of talking about it surrounding paid ads.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the inside scoop real quick. Anyone that you'll probably ever see online that's like, hey, I spent X amount of dollars, like, and it's some absurd number compared to what most people are used to seeing, they're likely either A, they are just burning cash like no tomorrow, and they just want to sound cool. Or, I mean, good for them, right? It's their money, not ours, right? Or they're actually making likely a 1-to-1 return on the front end, or as close to a 1-to-1 return on the front end, maybe a little bit of a loss, or of like what you're saying as an example, because the long tail effect of that, you're actually going to make a profit. So let me just take a client example. I can't explicitly state their name, but all right, they have a $39 product. I'm just going to go to the one we talked about a moment ago. We average, because it's super focused on the fitness space, so we'll average around $30, maybe $36, and during like the end of the year, whenever it's like super high CPMs, we're paying like $70 CPMs to get in front of like 1,000 people. Right, it'll be like $50 a purchase. Now, for anyone else, that is not profitable. That would not make sense. There's no reason to be spending $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a day, because you're just melting the cash, right? You're just doing it for fun. The reason it works for us is because we know that our system is converting 30 to 35 to 40% of the people that bought on the front end, and they're buying another $100 product, or they're upselling to $150 or $200 or $300, or now paying for private coaching, right? Which is thousands of dollars, right? It's far more expensive, right? So as an overall, we end up getting a much higher return. So the focus on our campaigns ends up less being, how do I get the most optimal 1 decimal place change in ROI, and more so on how do I fuel the fire, right? Ensuring there's not creative fatigue, building a level of virality and trust and credibility within the space, so that way when people do click on our ads, they have a much higher chance of converting. We have seen that there will be campaigns where a creative could be exhausted on the ad side. However, we're still seeing the conversions occur at a much higher rate than, any of the new creative that goes out. That makes sense. Just because of the built-in optimization that we've done, right? It's got 100,000, views and thousands of likes and shares and comments and engagements, which have built a level of trust and authority on the content and the product itself, which then allows us to just consistently scale that brand and that product on the long term. So does that make sense? I want to make sure I answer your question. I keep diving into side pieces as well.
Yeah, for sure. But that's the way that I love it. And that's the way that listeners love this show. But I feel like that you walk us right into yet another side alley, because I want to talk about some of those direct to consumer brands that we all see, that we all get advertised to on Facebook and Instagram in particular. And I'm going to call out, I'll use another real life example of something I can see with my eyes right now, which is shoes. So have you heard of the company Allbirds, Kole?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Allbirds, I was getting targeted with their ads literally for years, and I'm not necessarily a consumerist. I'm for sure a minimalist. I like to be on the go way too much, so I don't like things, but Allbirds just kept peppering me with ads. So eventually, when I'm back in Boston, walking down Newbury Street, and I see the Allbirds store, I'm just like, let me pop in there and let me check out, are these shoes even good? Are they comfortable? And Cole, I swear to you, I slipped it on my foot, and I was like, dang, I'm probably never going to buy another pair of shoes again. Like, this is so good, and that's all I buy now. But the reality is they'll never be able to track me back to that paid advertising. So it is kind of what you talked about. They built that trust over literally years with me. I saw the likes, the comments, the engagement that they're getting. I also had that brand familiarity, which it's a byproduct of also doing paid ads. It's just like everything else becomes easier when people see you. Think of all the big gurus. Even if you don't buy from Tony Robbins, well, you freaking know who Tony Robbins is because he pops up in a million places. So talk about those byproducts and how you value, which I don't know if you can place a value on that, but how do you value that in your paid advertising efforts and putting that into your marketing mix strategically?
It's a great question. I'll try to answer this in the best way that I can. Whenever it comes to advertising, if you spent any significant amount of money, you naturally see that obviously you start, let's just say you spent $1,000, right? Before you spent the $1,000, you had a certain degree of organic, direct, social proof that was coming to you on a consistent basis. After the $1,000, you'll start to see a little bit of an uptick. You're going to start seeing more likes, more engagements, more organic searches for your brand or your product or questions, right? Or direct searches. Or direct activity towards your site. So what's really cool about advertising, and when you're at that point where you can do it effectively, it does become a flywheel for everything else you've already put in motion. Again, I keep leaning back on that because I do see a lot of businesses try to start advertising before they have I like to say the free money, right? Or the free levers that can be managed on the back end. Like you need to have some degree of email put up. You need to have some type of SMS or customer service. Someone that can engage and interact with people that are interested in your product, have already bought your product or trying to return a product. Like you need to be able to save revenue. You also need to be able to ensure someone's consistently happy. If you don't have those systems in place, then the flywheel will not function as well as you would like because you're now going to be spending money to get people and then they're just going to be frustrated or they're going to be annoyed or there's going to be some type of problem that's going to occur, right? And it's just going to slow things down. So when it comes to advertising, the flywheel can be immense when you have those systems in play because then as you start to scale it up, you're going to start building a lot more long-term credibility and trust. Another good example or a good brand that does something like this is Huel, which is like a supplement brand. Their advertising is really good. I haven't worked with them, but I just love the creativity that they've put into their stuff. They're really good at customer content generation. So UGC, a lot of their video-based ads are really nice as well. And they do a good job on local display. So they have a really consistent voice and message and tone. And so when you do have, eventually come across their product, you have a much higher chance of actually buying, right? Just like you had with the Allbirds example. So the long tail effect is immense.
Yeah, I love that. And I particularly love the flywheel analogy because, yeah, you're right. It makes me realize back in my early 20s when I was playing with paid ads, I was just like, dang, I didn't have the ecosystem in full setup yet to really maximize it. I could have probably at that time been doing exactly what I was doing on the paid advertising front, but with a better ecosystem, been amplifying my results. So I love that analogy and your real life behind the scenes. And you also brought up some things that are like UGC, for example, user-generated content. For listeners who aren't aware of that just yet, it's where you're creative. Which remember, your creatives in the world of advertising are the visuals, the graphics, the videos that people see. UGC is when users, a companies like Allbirds customers are showing their shoes, their waterproof shoes being splashed on in the middle of a hurricane here in Florida. And so that's UGC. That's one shift that we've seen over the past few years, big time in the world of paid ads. But Cole, because you love this stuff and you keep bringing up so many other side alleys, talk to us more broadly about some of those shifts that you've noticed in the world of paid ads over the past couple years. I think 2020 changed so much, which you've already alluded to, but also looking forward, how do you see these shifts playing out?
Yeah, I say the two biggest shifts that has really come into play is your creative positioning and messaging, right? Really leaning towards a mixture of organic and standard-based advertising. So if I had to break down how I would advertise for a new brand or an established brand in the marketplace today, and let's just keep with Facebook, just because everyone understands Facebook. I would want a mixture of image-based ads, right, that are like clearly an ad. Okay, we've actually seen, just as a side note, we've actually seen a big uptick in like clearly ad image-based designs compared to someone trying to make something that looks organic that's scrolling in the feed. Part of it is likely due, based on what we're speculating, it's just a hypothesis on my end right now, is that so many people have started to make a switch towards trying to make their content look organic on the paid side, that everyone's starting to become blind to it in the scroll. So then when you started to revert back to some standard advertising practices with your imagery and your videos, you end up having a decent lift or a decent click-through rate or engagement. Or your click-through rate's lower, but your return on investment's higher on the back end. So it's worth to have like a lower engaged advertising. Now, what has worked really well over the last couple of years, especially because the massive influx of people actually engaging with the brands that they care about, as long as you establish a brand that makes people want to interact with you, right, is leveraging the UGC that you just expressed, right? Like, let's say, again, I'm going to use this as an example. I love this Sharpie. It's amazing. It's great. You need to buy one too, right? Let's just call that episode. That's what it was. Using that versus me saying it's great. Let's say I'm the actual owner of the business, versus me saying it's great is wildly different, because you now have the third-party perspective of someone else validating who you are, what your product is, what it does, and the outcome that it provided for that person. And so those things are really good at building like a first touch with a new customer base. So if you're running a cold traffic campaign, meaning you're targeting people that have never seen your product, never seen your brand, they don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you, leveraging the voice of another to then build initial interest in you and then retargeting it, right? Meaning, so you're retargeting the people that have already seen your user-generated ad with stuff that's clearly an ad, like a video ad that's like, buy my stuff, or an image ad that says the same thing, buy my stuff, ends up having a much higher output. So the direction I've seen in terms of the shift, or that we've seen in the shift, has been leverage organic content or organic looking content that leans towards your customers speaking for you and their stories to build a culture that sort of connects with your ideal customer, and then retarget that with more specific, clear, direct response advertising. That comes in the mind of, like, you have to be a little bit fancier in my mind with some of your audience building. That's a whole different conversation. I could probably just create like a 10-hour course on audience development nowadays. But you do also want to get a little bit more nitpicky with your audiences. And maybe we can dive into an example here in a little bit if necessary.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good place, because I feel like so many of our conversations keep coming back to the pool analogy that you talked about earlier, which is identifying those audiences. Who the heck are you even getting in front of? And obviously, I know in looking at the way that you guys work at AdLabs Marketing is you guys have it right on your website, which adlabsmarketing.com. We'll talk about it at the end of today's episode. But step one right there, market research. You can't do any of this stuff without understanding those audiences. So, Kole, I'd love for you to talk about audiences as far as how you think about them, both on the upfront side, because obviously you got to target your advertising towards somebody, but also now you're starting to get at audiences on the back end side. When you talk about retargeting, when you talk about capturing and building an audience, how does all that factor into the way you think about this?
It goes a little crazy, if I'm being honest. So by the way, I just want to remind you, the book is completely free, but I put together this book, and it sort of encapsulates my mind around how to build all of these audiences. So if for some reason you don't understand what's going on here, I'm happy to just give it to you guys. I don't know how this will work, but I'll make sure that he has access to it so he can give it to everyone. Is when it comes to your audiences, you have like 3 to 4 primary buckets, and we'll just maybe simplify to 3. You have top of funnel, so you have cold traffic. You have middle of funnel, which is like your socially engaged audience. We'll get back to that. And then you have bottom of funnel, the people that have been on your website in some way. So if you look at top of funnel, these people, they don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you, they've never seen you before. This is where you'll see most advertisers or videos online talk about how you target this niche or this group or this fancy segment or this demographic, and they spend so much time on it, right? That's really important. But what often gets overlooked and ignored is how you actually properly retarget the people you just spent all this time trying to identify. And so what this now comes down to is our middle of funnel segment. Our middle of funnel segment is people who have engaged with you on Facebook. They saw the ad, they watched a video, they liked, they clicked, they shared, they engaged with your Facebook page, right? They did any and or all of these actions, but one clear differentiator, they did not go to your website. So they did a passive engagement with you, which is a really important factor, because if they've seen your content passively, right, think about all the advertising you see on a given day. So much, right? So much so that I can almost guarantee you probably don't know of any brand that you saw, or maybe you only recall like one or two. However, your brain knows that it saw all of the other ads, okay? So when you build that bucket of people who saw your content or engaged with your content but didn't go to the website, you now build what I consistently am seeing on tons of accounts. And I've seen accounts that are spending millions of dollars. I've also seen accounts that are spending like $10 a month, right? Almost none of them have a properly built out video views or socially engaged audience. And so they're missing out on hundreds or thousands or millions of people they've already spent their hard-earned money on, that they could go and get in front of for cheaper than they did the first time. So it ends up being, I've generally seen it be about 30 to upwards of 50% cheaper to go after this audience than you did the cold traffic one. I hope you're following me. If you need me to stop, I can. But essentially what this does is it now gives you a pocket of people that you can easily retarget and then start pushing back to your website. This really comes into the flow of scaling itself. And again, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. So if we look at scaling itself, generally the model that people would say they try to have is like a 70-30 split. And what is a 70-30 split? Meaning 70% of it means that we're spending 70% of our ad dollars targeting new customers or new potential people that have never seen us before. They don't know us, they don't like us, they don't trust us, right? This is cold traffic. Then we retarget all of those people who have engaged with our videos, our content, and or have been to our website. Obviously, the people that have already been to our website that we retarget is likely going to be your highest return. Your second highest is going to be your middle of funnel audience. And then your very final one is going to be your lowest return most of the time. But what's really cool is when you have this broken down in this way, and again, you've probably heard it, right? You've heard of a funnel before. You end up actually usually being able to make up for the cost of that 70% that you were spending towards cold traffic between these two buckets. I want to stop there for a second. I want to make sure I answer your question. If I need to go over anything, I can. It's a lot of information. I just, my ADHD is going with me today.
Yeah, no, I love the example though, Kole. And obviously I love analogies. And for me, as the host of the show, I'm always just thinking about the listeners. And I'm just like, how can we really boil this down for listeners? And I want to, because I guess the theme of today's show is we're just going to use totally random and awkward analogies. And the one that I'm going to roll with right now, which I use very frequently, is let's talk about dating. And so for all of you listeners who are tuning into this, so hearing Kole talk about these different audiences, for me, what I'm hearing is, let's say I wanted to find Kole the perfect wife for himself. I know nothing about Kole's marital status, by the way, so not saying that he's available, ladies, but let's say that I wanted to find Kole the perfect wife for himself. Well, in a cold advertising campaign, he can tell me some of what he's interested in, but essentially the first step of that advertising campaign is I'm just going to walk Kole right on down the street, and we're going to see who turns their heads and says, oh, hey, he's my type, I'd be interested in him. And so that's where retargeting comes in. And this is where those audiences, those engaged audiences that Kole's talking about, that's where those come in, is that if we could take everybody who turned their head and looked at Kole as we walked down the street and said, yeah, he's my type, I'm potentially interested in him. Now the next time I take Kole out into public, I bring him into a room where it's just those people. It's just those people who have already said, yeah, Kole's my type. I don't know if I want to marry him just yet, but he's my type for sure. There's some level of interest there. So Kole, fair analogy, you think, at this point?
Yeah, you condensed it a heck of a lot better than I did. You know what? I'm rambling like crazy today, so it's good.
No, I love it because it really is that backstory. And genuinely, it was hearing your perspectives on all those different things that helped me come up with that analogy, because it's something that I don't think any of us think about, that our marketing in that way that you've just framed it for us, not just paid ads, but really all of our marketing is, how are we serving, how are we showing up in front of an audience that has no idea who we are, versus how are we showing up for the people who have already turned their head and been like, yeah, you're my type, versus how are we showing up for the ones that are just like, actually, yeah, like not only are you my type, but like I am in the market. And so the way that I would want to serve those people is drastically different than the way I'd serve the totally cold and random audience. So yeah, the way that we have to structure our marketing and of course our paid ads depends on who the heck those people are and where they are. Anything you want to add to that?
I think you started to allude to a really good point around the differentiator and how we have to communicate to people at each stage of growth or stage of the journey. By the way, we'll just call this, we'll refer to the buyer's journey, right? You know, from first time, they don't know who you are, all the way down to they've bought, or they've bought multiple times. Every single stage, for the most part, is going to require some type of slightly catered content to align with where they're at, whether you're informing, you're educating, you're delighting, you're validating their decisions, right? You're reinforcing behavior, right? You're providing a positive experience for them in some way all the way through the entire process. So I would definitely say, I'm trying to do that without going too far into it again, but I would definitely say is the creative, as you move down the funnel, has become really important, because you want to have a differentiator in each stage. You're not likely just going to be throwing a discount code to cold traffic. They don't know you, right? Why do they want your discount code, right? There's no reason, unless they're already actively trying to not find a similar product of yours, and they're trying to look at maybe a comparison that's just cheaper, right? Those are actually like usually the most cheap, worst customers to ever have if you're trying to get them off of a discount from the very front end. You probably only want to lean towards the bottom end of the funnel, because that way you're trying to maximize as much of your revenue until the very end, right? But I can go into the fun nuances of discounting and how you position it and all of those angles. But the creative positioning has become really, really important over the last few years.
Kole, so much goodness that we've jumped into here today. I am obviously responsible for looking at the clock, and I cannot believe how quickly time has flown by today. And somehow, I feel like we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg here. So there's so much more that we could go into, which is why, spoiler alert, big spoiler alert, and the listeners know more than you do about this, Kole, but I am going to have a spoiler alert for the listeners that, of course, I'm going to invite Kole for an Action Saturday episode. So all of you listeners who already know what Action Saturday is, make sure you're subscribed to the show, because I'm going to do everything in my power to peer pressure Kole to drop an Action Saturday episode on us. So Kole, super excited for even more of your wisdom in that, if you take me up on that offer, which I'd love for you to. But otherwise, as we do come to the end of this episode, you've obviously teased some huge resources for listeners. And before we give them the links to get their hands on that, and obviously we'll link to it down below, I'd love for you to try to. It's going to be a tough task, and I'm glad it's on you and not me. How the heck do we wrap this up in a bow for listeners? So much homework that clearly they need to do, and so many different things they need to think about. This is really, as you talked about paid advertising, you've put into context for us and into perspective how much work we need to do to be strategic and intentional, not only in our paid ads, but also in our marketing, and heck, also in our businesses. So what is the one action that you think that listeners should sit down, having heard all this today, and say, okay, I need to get clear on this, because this will set me up for success in my business?
All right, if I had to go a quick action item, if I can, just throw two in there real quick. One, focus on the free stuff first before you start spending all of your money on ads. Sounds exciting. I know everyone sells you on it. do all of the hard things first. Build your email campaigns, get some type of process and a flow put together. So when you do start spending ad dollars and you start seeing results, you have something already in play to start generating more and engaging those people consistently thereafter. You've already put all this hard work into generating that person, bringing in a new customer or getting an engagement. You might want to make sure you're getting the most out of it, or at least like an MVP, so minimum viable output or viable product from it on the tail end. Secondly, if you're going to start spending money on ads, you're already spending money on ads, look at your creatives, take some time and build a good degree of variations, and don't be afraid to test. If something's not working and you've only spent a couple of $100s on it or a little bit, and give it a little bit of time. Don't think that advertising doesn't work. Start and take a step back and look at, okay, am I positioning correctly? Is my communication right? Is the creative aligned with who I'm trying to target? If not, take a little bit of time, look at what you put out there and see if you can make any improvements. I guarantee if you go through and you start tweaking things or you start working with some of that data, you'll end up finding a little process or a recipe that works for you. And maybe it doesn't get you to, $20,000 or something crazy in terms of scale every day, but I guarantee it'll start getting you moving in the right direction. So you have that opportunity to consistently fuel your business from there on.
Woof. Kole, you took on a very difficult task and you absolutely nailed it. I love those two pieces of feedback for listeners here at the end of this episode. I built you up a lot at the beginning of this episode, and I can safely say that you 100%, more than 100% delivered on that. So you've been such a wealth of knowledge. I know that listeners are going to be chomping at the bit to get their hands on some of the free resources that you talked about, and also check out your work at adlabsmarketing.com. But Kole, tell listeners firsthand where the heck they should go to learn more about you, your business, and all the awesome stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, what's funny is you honestly can just go to adlabsmarketing.com. We try to share resources on there. We've been focusing a lot on the back end, a bunch of fun little products and things we're working on. So we've not been posting as much as we need to. But if you want to get access to the ebook, I'll make sure that he has a link for you guys. But it'll be AdLabs Marketing, and it'll be Ecom Growth Guide. It'll be a link in the header, and you'll be able to get access to it. If you want to be fancy and pay for it on Amazon, you can, but honestly, you don't need to. Go over here. I'll make sure you get the book. And if for some reason anyone has any issues, I'm happy to help everyone out. So that's all you need. I don't need anything else. I'm just here to help you guys try to provide value.
Heck yeah. And that I so love and appreciate. Kole, you've been such a wealth of knowledge. Listeners, you heard the link from Kole firsthand, adlabsmarketing.com. Of course, we're linking to it wherever it is that you're tuning into this episode, as well as the link to the book that Kole has talked about. When you go to his business website, you'll see right at the top, you'll see free guide, how to scale ads. They have a blog, they have a case study. Check all that stuff out, because clearly Kole knows what the heck he's talking about. And all this stuff is driven to grow your business. This is stuff that benefits you, which is why Kole and every guest that comes on the show does exactly what they do. So Kole, thank you so much today on behalf of myself and all the listeners for joining us on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you.